Good evening and welcome to World Report. We begin tonight with what can only be described as the most dramatic and consequential shift in Washington's strategic stance on the war in Ukraine since the conflict began 2 years ago. A shift that places immense, almost unbearable pressure on Kyiv to negotiate an end to the hostilities, potentially involving a historic and painful compromise on sovereign territory. Sources close to both the White House and the State Department confirm exclusively to this network that the Biden administration has undertaken a vigorous, private diplomatic campaign urging Ukrainian leadership to seriously consider a controversial yet meticulously crafted peace agreement framework. This is not mere suggestion. This is calculated persuasion, tying the future continuity of Western support to a newfound flexibility on territorial maximums. The central pillar of this unprecedented proposal is the creation of a massive internationally backed Free Economic Zone, or FEZ, covering the currently occupied Donbas territories. This zone would function as the geopolitical and economic price paid for a guaranteed, long-term, and verifiable cessation of hostilities along the existing contact line. This gambit is a calculated risk, attempting to fundamentally alter the focus of the war from one of bloody, attritional territorial recovery to one of immediate economic stabilization and national reconstruction for the majority of occupied Ukraine.
The key question, the existential question, now echoing through the halls of Kyiv. Can President Zelensky and his government accept a historic economic lifeline that might simultaneously and fundamentally redefine the country's borders for the foreseeable future? We have the details, the geopolitical context, and the expert analysis on this high-stakes proposal that is rewriting the rules of engagement. The core of this sensitive initiative emerged not from formal negotiating tables, but from recent intensive high-level meetings held in secure locations in Brussels and Kyiv over the past 72 hours, involving senior U.S. State Department envoys and representatives from the Ukrainian presidential office. While the proposal is shrouded in layers of non-disclosure and has yet to be publicly acknowledged, our sources indicate the structure of the FEZ is precise, revolutionary, and deeply disruptive to Kyiv's established war aims. Let us break down the specifics of this initiative. Who? The diplomatic push is being spearheaded directly by the U.S. State Department, specifically engaging with allies in the European Union, notably Berlin and Paris, who have signaled a desperate need for a defined off-ramp to the conflict, especially in the face of escalating economic costs and shifting domestic political realities.
The recipient is the inner circle of the administration of President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is now being forced to weigh political survival against national survival. What? Washington is offering a comprehensive, indeed monumental, multi-billion-dollar economic package. This package is entirely contingent on Ukraine agreeing to establish the Donbas region, specifically those areas currently under confirmed Russian military control or effective administration, as a 99-year special administrative economic zone. This is essentially a long-term lease of economic jurisdiction, a form of economic sovereignty outsourcing. Under the terms currently proposed, this zone would operate with drastically limited central government oversight from Kyiv, focusing instead on rapid development. The FEZ would feature colossal tax incentives, full regulatory relief, and guaranteed insulation from Ukrainian legal bureaucracy, all designed to attract immediate, significant global investment. The goal, to transform this war-torn region into an economic buffer zone that international investors would have a vested interest in protecting. Crucially, the reconstruction funds and the operational oversight would be managed by a multinational independent board, likely composed of experts from Singapore, Switzerland, and Western donor nations, ensuring transparency and, most importantly, explicitly excluding any direct Russian influence. The financial guarantees involved stretch into the hundreds of billions, funds Kyiv desperately needs for infrastructure repair across the rest of the nation. When? The immediacy of the proposal is revealing. Washington is clearly aiming for a major diplomatic breakthrough before the deep winter campaigning season begins, which typically locks in front lines and slows military activity. There is a sense of urgency, driven by the realization that military momentum has stalled. Crucially, the activation of this massive FEZ is entirely contingent upon an immediate, fully verifiable, and internationally monitored ceasefire across the existing line of contact, meaning no further territorial changes are allowed, codified by international treaty. Why?
The U.S. rationale, according to leaked internal diplomatic cables, is rooted in pragmatic realism. Washington believes that Ukraine cannot fully recover its economic strength nor sustain its long-term sovereignty while fighting a protracted multi-year war of attrition against a vastly larger adversary. The continuous strain on Ukrainian resources, both human and fiscal, is unsustainable. The Fez proposal provides a necessary economic alternative to continued battlefield deadlock, prioritizing national stability and immediate reconstruction in the free parts of Ukraine. But for Kyiv, this economic realism comes at an extraordinary cost.
It equates to effectively conceding control, if not outright sovereignty, over the territories for nearly a century. It institutionalizes the loss of these lands, exchanging the possibility of military recovery for the certainty of economic stability elsewhere. To truly grasp the gravity of this diplomatic maneuver, we must look at the immense political realities facing Washington, Kyiv, and the broader alliance. For the United States, we are witnessing the apex of war fatigue. There is palpable and growing pressure in Congress and among allied capitals to define the ultimate strategic goal of supporting Ukraine. Is that goal the full restoration of the 1991 borders, as Kyiv demands? Or is it the stabilization of a viable, democratic, and economically functional Ukraine, even if that viability necessitates a difficult, albeit temporary, territorial concession? The Fez proposal is Washington's definitive attempt to answer that second question. It is an acknowledgement that the war has reached a point where the cost of achieving the maximalist goal, full territorial recovery, may now exceed the political and economic capacity of the Western alliance. It is an economic solution being applied to a geopolitical problem that has already consumed hundreds of billions of dollars and defined the foreign policy of the West for the better part of 3 years. We must also consider the political timeline in the United States, specifically the upcoming election cycle.
A protracted, unresolved conflict serves no political interest in Washington. The administration seeks to present a stabilized, if imperfect, resolution before political attention shifts entirely inward. This Fez offers a tangible, seemingly peaceful, diplomatic victory, an off-ramp that allows the U.S. to transition from high-intensity military support to long-term reconstruction leadership. Now turn to President Zelensky. This proposal presents arguably the most agonizing and politically dangerous decision of the entire conflict. Ukrainian officials, civilian and military alike, have repeatedly and emphatically stated that territorial integrity is non-negotiable. This is the moral high ground, the principle for which thousands of soldiers have given their lives. Accepting a Fez deal, even one funded and overseen by the West, would be politically toxic, potentially cataclysmic at home. It would immediately invite ferocious criticism from nationalist factions, military leadership, and those citizens deeply traumatized by the war, who view any territorial compromise as a betrayal of the heroic narrative. These critics will undoubtedly frame the proposal as a Munich moment, a forced capitulation driven by Western expediency. Yet the pragmatic reality of the front line, the slow, grinding nature of the attrition war, the horrific human cost, and the depletion of both military and economic reserves, means that the option of a stable peace, secured and guaranteed by unprecedented Western economic investment, is gaining silent traction among a powerful faction of economic and political advisors in Kyiv. They are the pragmatists who look beyond the immediate battle and see a generation-long struggle to rebuild a shattered economy. This proposal forces Kyiv to choose: continue the fight for maximalist goals and risk total economic collapse and social instability across the nation, or accept this profound offer and guarantee the survival and flourishing of the rest of Ukraine while facing immediate, intense internal political turmoil. It is a choice between principle and practicality, a decision no democratic leader should ever have to make. Joining us now is Dr. Helena Vasilev, Director of the Eastern European Security Initiative at the prestigious Institute for Global Policy, to break down the technical and political viability of this free economic zone concept. Dr. Vasilev, thank you for navigating this complex issue with us tonight. Dr. Vasilev, let's begin with the pure economics. Can this highly conceptual idea, establishing a massively invested economic zone right on a disputed, hostile border, actually work? Or is it fundamentally too vulnerable to Russia's next move?
The prevailing economic logic suggests this is a high-risk, high-reward strategy. The underlying theory is robust. If you manage to create an area so fundamentally vital to major international trade, investment, and supply chains, an area where Western capital is deeply entrenched, its stability instantly becomes a non-negotiable priority for every major Western power and financial institution. We have seen historical parallels, though none perfect, in models like the rapid development of Shenzhen under special economic status, or the unique legal framework that once underpinned Hong Kong's success. The promise here is not merely billions, but the assurance of immediate, massive Western cash flow directed precisely where reconstruction is most needed. But that is the reward. The downside, as you touched upon, is the fundamental trade-off. You are essentially trading territorial sovereignty, or the effective control of it, for economic prosperity. Furthermore, this plan, by focusing on economic stabilization, dangerously avoids addressing the core issue, Russia's long-term imperial intentions. If Moscow decides the FEZ is too successful, too alluring, or too closely tied to NATO economic influence, what structural guarantees prevent them from simply destabilizing it again, 5, 10, or 50 years down the line? This FEZ risks becoming a permanent geopolitical tripwire. And what about the political fallout within Ukraine itself?
This is arguably a more dangerous minefield than the battlefield itself. Can President Zelensky, the wartime leader who galvanized the nation around the concept of total victory and restoration, possibly survive accepting such a deal? Politically, it is a tightrope walk over an abyss. Zelensky would have to execute an incredible feat of political messaging. He would need to sell this to his people not as surrender, but as a necessary temporary measure, a strategic pause, to ensure the survival, security, and economic solvency of the rest of Ukraine. The argument would be that the Western investment guarantees the economic infrastructure and financial stability needed for a future diplomatic counteroffensive, securing the nation's future, even if the borders remain temporarily frozen. But the optics are undeniable and terrible for him. To many citizens, and certainly to the hardline security and defense establishment, it looks like the U.S. and the West are prioritizing an expedient, cost-saving exit over Ukraine's stated, morally justifiable goal of full territorial integrity. The pressure from the U.S. is immense because it is increasingly linking continued substantial security aid, the weapons and resources that keep Ukraine in the fight, to this diplomatic flexibility. Kyiv is now in an impossible bind. Pursue the war until total military victory, thereby risking economic and demographic exhaustion, or accept this powerful financial offer and face immediate, perhaps regime-threatening, internal political turmoil. Dr. Vasiliev, let's touch on the nature of the guarantee. The proposal involves a 99-year economic lease. What mechanisms exist to prevent either side from walking away, or Russia from simply recognizing this territory as an independent state during this period? Is the guarantee sufficient? The guarantee hinges entirely on international treaty enforcement and the sheer weight of international capital. The proposed mechanism involves anchoring the FEZ through the World Bank and specific European funds, meaning any violation by Russia would trigger immediate and unprecedented economic countermeasures that go far beyond current sanctions. However, this is precisely where the legal complexities become agonizing. A 99-year lease is an effective de facto concession of control. While Kyiv retains legal title, the functional administration, customs, trade law, investment regulation would be out of their hands. Russia could potentially claim this arrangement justifies their initial intervention, framing it as stopping Western economic colonialism. The diplomatic language would have to be airtight to prevent Moscow from interpreting this as a tacit green light for annexation. The broader implication is that if Kyiv accepts this, it changes the fundamental relationship with its Western partners. No longer is it simply a partnership of defense. It becomes a conditional, financially managed relationship where foreign policy is directly influenced by financial expediency. We are entering a new phase of international relations, where economic levers are proving more powerful than military resolve. This proposal forces us all to ask, has the diplomatic calculus finally shifted from winning the war to defining the end? Dr. Vasiliev, insightful and essential analysis. Thank you for your time tonight on World Report. The diplomatic maneuvering behind the scenes is escalating rapidly. Reports suggest that high-level officials from the presidential office in Kyiv are currently engaged in intense closed-door debates, wrestling with the implications of this proposal.
The economic ministries, who see the tantalizing possibility of multi-billion-dollar reconstruction funds, are reportedly clashing fiercely with the defense and security establishment, who view the concession as morally indefensible. Kyiv's response to this unprecedented economic proposal is expected within days, and that decision, whether to accept the economic lifeline or continue the military struggle, will define the trajectory of the war in Eastern Europe, and indeed the future architecture of international stability.
The world is watching to see if principle or pragmatism will prevail at this critical crossroads of history. We will continue to track the reaction in Kyiv, analyzing every statement from President Zelensky and his cabinet. We are also monitoring the geopolitical ripples this creates in Moscow, where the Kremlin is undoubtedly assessing whether this Western proposal inadvertently delivers them a strategic victory. Furthermore, we will track the continuing debate in the halls of the U.S. Congress, where the cost of war fatigue remains a potent political factor. For the very latest updates on this developing story, including exclusive diplomatic memos and expert commentary on the legal framework of the proposed Free Economic Zone, please visit our website or subscribe to our breaking news alerts on our app. That's World Report for tonight. Good night.